um, it might be that the trend of individualism has stopped serving our goals, and that in our state of being maximally individuated citizens, we are finally finding ourselves weak and impotent. And the trust in official institutions to help us with a lot of problems that are facing us individually and collectively is at all times low, and we are looking for informal alternatives that are more aligned with our goals and values. And more fundamentally, we feel need to work towards empowerment against the system, which is increasingly not on our side. And that is largely where life itself fits in, and many other groups of this type. But talking about social capital and cooperation, and then you immediately get into this situation where there are so many different concepts which are very closely related. So sometimes when you're talking about things, you could be using them interchangeably, but in fact, they are not synonyms. Um, but there are these different aspects of it, and maybe there is a workflow and order in which we get in, and maybe there are ways we can kind of avoid going through all these phases. But some people think that you can just kind of like jump into something and see some value, but it's kind of more than that, because it's not an algorithm, it's human beings, and human beings are complex, and there are various issues. So I have here highlighted different entry points, and there is interdependency both on human interpersonal level, but also processes as well themselves. And there are different outcomes. Um, so if we are socializing, we are not necessarily looking for a relationship. And then, um, connections are not necessarily leading to cooperation, but they're there and they represent certain potentialities that we can manipulate and drill into in order to get to what we are looking for. And a lot of these things are just not automatic, they need nurturing um, in order to work. Any questions? Anyone wants to jump in straight away? Okay, gonna move on. We want more, we want better. So we're always talking about doing something together, and the problem or the premise is that we do understand that cooperation is important, but we are either not doing it or not doing it well enough. And how do we know that we're not doing it good enough? It's because we are not coming up with new models that work in real world and that can fundamentally challenge the existing paradigms. So everything that we consider relationship and cooperation seems to be encapsulated within small functional units, and they're not transformational. Interesting thing to talk about here as well is the lack of bridges. And we have lack of bridges between different concepts that seem to live in different worlds, but one that is very glaring is lack of bridge between game A and game B, because in a way, we don't want to analogize ourselves with something we are sort of building movement, alternative movement to rival. But by internalizing everything within game B, it sort of creates a blind spot where we can find things to be okay when in fact things don't work because we don't transpose them over functional paradigms in the game A. And also, we are talking so much about it on a meta level because we don't seem to have an idea how to go about it. So, if we were to imagine this new world where life will be more relational and collaborative, or particular examples of a perfect, empowering collaboration, each of us would have their own story, And we are not at the moment at the point where we've started allocating these ideas. So when we talk about cooperation, what do we actually imagine? To what degree? To what degree we want cooperation to be our life as opposed to being a limited short-term remediation or solution? Again, if anyone wants to say something now.
It's really interesting, Momcilo. I would you go one slide back for
Yep.
me?
Yep.
I just wanted to pop something in the chat. Oh, I can't upload the file, can I? I was sitting on a call around digital organizing, and they shared this graphic that I wanted to share because just to kind of see if it was similar, because I really like this flow that you're developing and like the entry points. And I just wanted to share that pyramid for like marketing versus organizing. And I think that there's like similarities between it with like the different phases. And so I just wanted to share that because I really like what you have here.
Yeah,
And
let me just see because I lost the Zoom now.
okay.
Um, oh, because my Zoom is up there. Okay. Well, I hope others can see it, but I can't see it at the moment. So
I'll send it to you in Signal too, if that's easier.
yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Yeah. So this is an analysis, and we can identify at least two different types of motivation for cooperation. And for me, it looked like there is utilitarian and aspirational type. One of them, the utilitarian one, is what can we do for each other? And it answers the question, is this relationship useful? And there is aspirational, which is more about identity, meaning, and future. Who do I become by being connected to this person? And what is the place of this person in my future? Am I inspired, augmented, motivated, excited when in company of this person? And it answers the question, is this relationship meaningful? And then we have also empowerment, which can be both utilitarian and aspirational. Aspirational, when you see the empowerment as something that transforms you and has a long-term effect. And we could also say that utilitarian is more of a tactical type of cooperation, while aspirational is strategic. Remedial would be I'm out of balance and I desperately need help. And aspirational could be I'm in the flow and I have ideas and energy, but I could do with some help because the world is creating friction as I'm trying to move more and faster, to do more and faster. But again, there is a bridge needed between these to kind of define the relationship because depending on what you're looking for, you will be really seeing the different picture and therefore you won't be able to relate to each other without interfacing in a certain way. Then we have also different type of personalities, and some people just crave relationships. They experience social connections as a primary reward, and they're partly or fully defined through bonds with others. Future orientation sees growth opportunities linked to these relationships. But there are also people who don't see social connections as intrinsically rewarding, and they avoid attachment and they manage to cope with their problems internally. And they probably feel most comfortable being with themselves. They're self-sufficient. Emotionally, they just don't get too much out of socializing. And traumas and or repeated disappointments in relationship might be to do something with that, but I'm just stating that they're different people with different needs,
Ну,
different
то есть вот теперь,
motivation.
да, теперь работает, но выпадает.
I think that was accidental. Um,
Just wondering, Momcilo, like, does that kind of correlate in your mind with extrovert, what is usually labeled extrovert and introvert?
yeah, let's say it's that.
Okay,
There
right.
are many different ways of saying
Yeah,
the
sure,
same
sure.
thing, but yeah, let's say that. It's just some sort of internal need or dopamine release or being happy and comfortable in one environment or the other. But it's quite distinct, even though it's a spectrum, and depending where you are, it's going to be milder or stronger. But yeah,
Yeah, sorry, I had a question on that slide as well.
yeah.
I guess I just wasn't quite clear. Maybe I missed it in what you said, like why you're sort of separating those two halves and thinking that we need a bridge between them. To me, they seem sort of quite connected already. Um,
So basically, the left one and the right hand side, they kind of internally need bridges, but there's also a bridge needed between these two. So there are certain people who are looking for utilitarian type of cooperation because they simply cannot see this aspirational side. They're more of short-term thinkers. They're more of people who react to needs, immediate needs, as opposed to building a strategic side of it. And also might be about people who are not imaginative enough to be able to go that far ahead. And I was recently in a meetup about futures imagined, and there was an experiment about how far can people imagine themselves, the world, the future, and it was really surprising that quite a few people couldn't imagine future past a few days ahead. And then some people seem to live almost in future at the same time as living in the present, and kind of moving those back and forth. So co-living in the future. So depending on what of the type of people, you can't be selling an aspirational cooperation to the person who wants an immediate results. So that's why I said the bridge is needed. Because so for example, if I'm even giving presentation and I cannot assume that you will all have the same idea about what I'm trying to talk about. So just kind of acknowledging that there are different perspectives as far as we can and identifying them in order to classify so you can tailor your approach and be understanding of other people's needs. Um, I'm going to go now slightly off tangent here. And there is an evidence that links the depletion of social fabric with a number of social outcomes or negative social outcomes, and it's isolation and loneliness, poor health, radicalization, lack of economic growth, crime, and other things. And many countries have now started to acknowledge the importance of nurturing social capital and having healthy communities. And there's money made available for different programs that try to address and improve things. One of them is here in where I live in the UK. It's called Big Local, and I think it's funded by National Lottery. Over the years, it has distributed over 270 million pounds to communities to strengthen social capital. And there are no expectations. It is pretty much down to individual communities to use money as they wish, and majority of program that they're providing falls within these categories. There are events, community gatherings, helping people set up businesses and find jobs, building playgrounds for kids, health and well-being, providing small grants. And the idea is to cultivate the capacity of communities. But this is very much a remedial side of the idea of cooperation. It's not heading for a more aspirational future, synergetic future, which will be providing or giving huge payoffs. But it's almost like an informal institution because it's dealing with inefficiencies of the formal institutions to deal with these problems in the society. And they're often to do with addiction and with mental health and with just people marginalized in the society. But eventually, whatever happens there, it will be a greater justice, it will be a better neighborhood, but it's not going far enough in order to empower this neighborhood to competitively feature in the world. So it is just interesting that this is the way it's envisaged. It's almost kind of like use the money, throw it, organize some parties, and it's a lovely thing, but there is no kind of like strategy to it as such, and they pretty much acknowledge that. While they do emphasize that there are some positive aspects of it, the question is, once the energy or the money starts flowing into these things, what will happen? Will the benefits of these programs, will they just stop because they're simply dependent on money being pumped in? Now we have a broader concept of social capital here, and we can see that it's not as simple, and many different authors had different ideas what works and how it works. We have and that also kind of goes internally. So it's not anymore even social work, but it's more kind of like how you relate or how you understand the importance of these things, because you can easily miss the importance, for example, of weak ties that Mark Granovetter here emphasizes. He says strong ties are essential for keeping the cohesion between close-knit, coherent groups, but weak ties are even more important because they provide bridges between these groups. So when you exchange information, small talk with someone and mention that you are working or doing something, somebody might say, hey, but I know the guy who's doing, or I know the lady who's doing the same thing. And that's how you make these accidental, really valuable connections. We also need to rethink the way, sort of how we think about neighborhoods. What is community, the dynamics in the community. Then Ray Oldenburg talked about third place, which is all these spaces where you meet people and talk, and they don't exist anymore in the same way. You would go to the market and have this informal chat, which would probably go under weak ties. Have safe places and cafes where you would meet people, bookstores, but they're kind of disappearing, and services are becoming anonymous. And that all feeds into what social capital is and the depletion of it. And then this is more kind of like ideation. How would we create a successful MVP for a meaningful relationship, which means a relationship which will be transformative and where you will have space or place for that person in your future, or cooperational paradigm. And to know that, we cannot just say we're going to do that in isolation. We need to provide some sort of bridge to the game A, because we need to tap to the needs that we don't like to admit that we have them. It's almost going back to the Freudian id, as opposed to always living in this normative superego, which in our case lives in metamodernism, for example. So we do not really link these things to our real needs, and we avoid saying them. So we live in the meta cloud of stating noble things, rather really tapping back into our psyche. And I believe before we actually make this honesty transition, we won't be able to create this convincing model that we can take further and address real world problems and provide alternatives to the game B. So now I just want to talk a little bit about extreme methods. I didn't dig into that, even though I have ideas, and I just kind of hastily drew these up. But it's really possible to speed collaboration and relationship between people. I think the main thing is that you need to make a mutual investment. You need to commit to someone, and you need to make investment, and you need to have to be prepared for risk in the way you approach trust. And in a way, it needs to be engineered, because it won't emerge. It's not an emergent thing. It's too much of a thing. So you need to create an equivalent of deliberately developmental spaces, but specifically in order to create these safe spaces for cooperation. And one of the ways to do it is to invent certain algorithmic or non-algorithmic trust system, which will be based on some sort of pledges and promises to other person, and the external visibility verification, where you will try to live up to your world, because there will be all sort of incentives and pressure for you to do so. And I think the culture will evolve out of these strong pockets of coherence in a particular systematic or systems way. But I don't think people are experimenting with these things. Just to say that I've actually done a relatively big experiment. I purchased a property with a stranger, sort of half-half. She's a Swedish woman. She's 70 years old. And I've had that property for 2 years now with her and everything. He's working fine so far, but I just thought that it would be really exciting to be able to do that. It's, I'm doing a little bit of experimentation on the side. Web3 and trust. This is a tough one, because Web3 really promised a lot. But at the same time, I think it went the wrong way, because it tried to reduce the human relationships and trust to protocol. And it wanted to solve the problem in a sort of trustless way. But by doing that, it made even bigger gap between human beings. So it would be interesting to incorporate Web3 ideas, which are very interesting and strong, with real life solutions. And that's why I put here bridge needed again. So that would be it, and I welcome anyone to comment.
Cool, thanks very much. Really interesting. I had a couple of thoughts. So, I mean, firstly, I'm just really curious to hear more about in your extreme methods. Like, a lot of them seem quite self-explanatory, but I was curious to hear more about how you're envisaging ritualized collective vulnerability, and like just what kinds of practices you're imagining there. And then I guess just to comment on your point about needing to connect game B and game A, that seems like really right to me. And I think I recently heard Jim Rutt on a podcast saying basically exactly the same thing. And I think that's kind of always the way he's thought of game B, actually, that when you have a specific game B community, It's not enough just to sort of live this sort of utopian commune type lifestyle, that you need to work out, for example, what service or product you're going to offer to the wider game A community around it in order to be sustainable longer term. And he thinks that's one of the reasons game B experiments have failed in the past, is that they haven't done that. So I think you're also right that not enough people are experimenting with that.
Yeah, just going to Jim Roth in Game B. Well, I'm not sure at the moment where he is, but he used to be like quite an absolutist in that sense. And there was a great deal of thinking about this idea that we do need a dictator in order to take us into Game B, but then finding a way to curtail potential for turning into a permanent dictator. And so that was one of the problems that he was particularly interested in. But yeah, I didn't listen to that one where he was talking about the need for the game A. But for me, why it's important primarily is because a lot of high quality people are in the game A. And in order to attract them, you need to create a bridge. If it was the other way around, we probably wouldn't need a bridge. But game A is stronger in many ways. The outcomes are stronger. But Simon, please.
Yeah, thanks. I find this all really interesting, partly because I'm thinking along parallel lines myself. And I think one of the things that puzzles me a lot, you kind of mentioned trust towards the end, you mentioned it here, and it's not quite clear. I mean, the idea of enforcement and trust, I don't really understand how you're using that when the sort of trust that can be enforced. I understand trust. My understanding of trust is, I like to call it it's a more or less well-grounded belief that the person you're trusting, the people you're trusting, will behave or decide in a way that you would approve of. That's more or less what I think trust means to me. And given the choice, because obviously it's only comes into play when there is actual choice. And I am wondering a lot about, this may just be a comment rather than a question, but I'm wondering a lot about how we make this transition between the current social economy and the kind of social economy which I think you might be pointing towards. And I'm doing a lot of work with commons people at the moment, particularly in England. There's a new group called Growing the Commons, which I'm heavily involved with. And I think they are looking at quite similar issues. And I do think one of the issues is this issue of the people, the have-nots, if you like, the people who are not wealthy, precarity and stress. And how do we move from a position where how do we move from this sort of stressful life where we're not sure about where our next paycheck is coming from?
So that touches on liquid modernity, Simon, where the world has lost the
thrive mutually.
Oh, are you there, Simon? Maybe Megan, you go next. I think Simon's been cut off.
Hopefully you can come back. I was really interested in the
Yeah.
comments. I just wanted to state I really enjoyed your presentation as well, and I like one of the slides you have initiate this one where you're talking about like the three things we need to do, which is like make it more valuable than the current system, things like that. And I think another piece that I'm identifying is or be like making sure we're effective is another one that you had. I was listening to this review of this book that talks about our textiles, and they said something which is like we underestimate how quickly technology can feel like nature. And like even from like the 60s, you know, we have is when we first had synthetic material, and now it's just like it totally changed everything. And I think this piece of it, like if we can implement these regenerative technologies in a way that becomes the new normal, that's when we start seeing that emergence. And I think what you're kind of building for trust, it kind of maybe gives this opportunity where if we can't, we have to separate the value system and the economic system somehow. You know, does it become more of like invest in trust? You know, maybe that's how you're able to buy land when you might not be able to, as an alternative to like getting a loan individually. And it just like opens up more opportunities for people to rely on each other. And I think to what Simon was saying is like people who don't have a lot of income, you know, them going in on a property with someone might be more difficult. But what I'm seeing is like for like place-based activities, things like swap meets, you know, or other ways to address that is like sharing resources.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was my 2
Yes.
cents.
So this is like a really interesting, like sharing resources as well. Like so let's say you have properties and you're renting them out. You will be outsourcing somebody in from the game A world in order to rent your properties out, to do your accounting, to do your cleaning, organization, whatever repairs, and you can directly transfer that into game B through some sort of cooperative agreement. So you could replicate exactly the same thing. But why don't we do it? Because there isn't sufficient trust of competence, or proof of competence, and then trust also of honesty. So that's why trust is really essential because as an intermediary, the states and the underlying system uh, provide the promise of trust that we are now finding increasingly are actually not working. And so these cracks are also an opportunity for something to come and supplement and solve the problem because it's a real problem. But it becomes kind of more apparent now than it was there before. But can I just like sorry, Simon, you got cut off and I,
No, absolutely sorry. It's just my internet randomly fails occasionally, so but that's
yeah.
fine. Carry on.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, regarding trust. So why are we talking about trust and like enforcing trust or doing something with trust? So first of all, because trust is an obstacle to many things. When you talk about dating, trust is an obstacle. Like when it comes to friendship, like you're always talking about like levels of trust at which you're going to unlock certain kind of types of friendship. So everything goes along that side. There is a psychological need for trust. Some people more, some people less. Trust as a risk. And then finally, you're looking a guarantee against breaking of trust because it can hurt you emotionally, it can cause you material damages, um, and um, and then also I just want to say like what you mentioned that things don't make sense anymore. People are finding themselves, and I was just going to refer to liquid modernity, and that I was talking about before, and where everything seems not to be solid anymore, and therefore liquid. It kind of loses form, formless, and we're finding very difficult to deal with things which are shapeless or are changing shape all the time. David?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think that this topic is very important, but it's also kind of frustrating to talk about because it's difficult to even know what a bridge would look like. Like if you saw a bridge, would you know it's a bridge? it seems like we're talking about something that either will just kind of emerge on its own, or it's something somebody will build or something many people will build. And if it's something that somebody or many people will build, is that like a software system? Is it a cultural movement? So there's a lot of different things that this could be, that whatever it is that we're talking about. And when you have something that you might have a chance at building, like a software system, for example, you could define the requirements first. What does it have to fulfill in order to be this bridge between game A and B? So I thought that for anybody who wants to answer that, like you were talking about an MVP, what are the requirements for our MVP if we were to write software tests for it? Like when you were talking about the different types of motivation, like I think you said, what it was, a utilitarian, aspirational, and then game A and game B, or any of these other dualities that we've been talking about. It seems like one of the requirements might be that this bridge is able to hold these different opposing viewpoints and hold the complexity and not lean to one side exclusively. So I mean, if we're talking about, I forgot the organization that you mentioned, kind of as having this kind of an intrinsic kind of a focus. So would the MVPs be something that has both intrinsic and extrinsic focus or effectiveness? It's kind of hard. I don't have a very good answer. I just wanted to say I think maybe we should talk about the requirements that we would like to see in a bridge.
Yeah, and that's a really good topic. Um, so when it comes to theory of change or transformation, it's generally considered to be a difficult thing, and um, so one way of making everyone understand each other and thinking alike would be to drug everyone, like entire population of the planet, with some drugs that would make you love your neighbor, let's say. But here, the bridge is really the acknowledgement that underneath there is something like a common denominator, and that we are all after the same things. For example, when we have ideologies, every ideology is just trying to implement and provide a safe space and a nurturing space for realization of certain ideals. So any ideology is trying to do that. There is no ideology that is just designed to hurt someone. The ideology is you're trying to build something where you feel comfortable and where you're going to be able to realize your values and your aspirations. Um, so what you're talking about is a translation, and you are saying to someone, okay, we both want the same things, but we have slightly different approach. But if you use kind of like meritocracy as a sort of starting point, you could easily convince game A people to come to your side if you provided a mousetrap that is better at catching mice, for example. So just kind of understanding that it doesn't have to be um, confrontational. Ideology is not something inherent, is more kind of like means to an end, but the end is really the same. It's just that people have different ideas. And the way to kind of convince them is by providing quality as opposed to providing ideas of something. And that's what I'm actually going into in terms of this kind of like MVP for cooperation. It has to be good. It cannot be just a nice story. That's what I meant by it. Sorry, Megan, did you not want to ask some?
Yeah, just my 2 cents here. I for the bridge, I like that question of like, what is it? And I think for me, I get worried saying like it's technology or one piece of technology because when we talk about emergence and like the constant of change, and the reason our current systems are failing, it's because they're designed to be like static or built for these specific types of conditions. And so building one bridge, sets us up for getting maybe closer to A and B, but we constantly have to keep iterating and building new bridges, and depending on like how that changes the environment we're in. And so all that to say that I think that it's for me more of the intent, like every day waking up and like seeing my options available and trying to pick the one that makes it a little bit closer. Um, and that I think that the bridges are maybe more service designs than specific software, because it's like, okay, we have this one technology, but then how do you apply it in a meaningful way? And like there could be technologies that are extractive, but if they're applied in a way that is towards getting people to gain B. For example, I'm working in social media chat marketing, which is like, so you're in the social media game A space, but like the goal of that technology is to get people off of social media. And so like if it's getting them off to places that are more productive, is that a piece that's contributing? I like to look at it like, where are the resources flowing? Are they flowing from right into the existing system or into new systems? So like especially with finances, like if we can, in any ways we can get like some type of that money trickling into going back into our local communities and not back up to the top. It's kind of like how I view it too, those bridges making more holes. Yeah.
Yeah, I was also thinking, sort of, what would this ideal of cooperative arrangement look like? How could we, and that's maybe something that I mentioned before, is sort of, I like to think of everything that stops me from doing what I want to do as a frustration, and everyone has their own frustrations, and a lot of our frustrations are of similar type. We all have to pay the taxes and pay insurance and do this and that, and sort of kind of like interaction with the system, which sets a chain of obligations. And for some reason, we're kind of like duplicating this endlessly, in the sense that we are all kind of it's consuming our time that we could spend more creatively and more productively. So why do people not get together in order to create a kind of like a front to the system where we're not going to be individually dealing with it, but as a group? Would that not be sort of like one of the fantastic ways of connecting game A and game B, because it's like a real life stuff, but it's just like a different approach to it. So